In this review of the week's news, it's all about building. A new motorway along Johns Road, a new science and engineering precinct at the University of Canterbury, and a new pavilion at the Hagley Cricket Oval. This is CTV News Week in Review. I'm Grant Mangan. High Country Explorer Tours is facing a potential closure of their business after an American-owned company took over the property lease where they operate most of their tours.
23 years of business may soon come to an end. American company Coast Range Investments increased their stake in the lease to 100% after the Overseas Investment Office approved their application in 2010. Last Friday, High Country was evicted from the property.
So it means that we cannot carry out our advertised products, which puts New Zealand tourism in a very difficult position.
The business has been guiding tourists through Canterbury's High Country stations since 1991. High Country Explorer Tours director Rod Bennett is devastated.
Without Flock Hill, that takes out the critical component in what we do, because what we're doing is supplying a seamless journey, and because of the ability to do that, we can condense so much more into one day because we're using each component to get from one point to the next.
Coast Range's application did not mention High Country's use of roads on the property and the crucial importance of access for their business. Mr Bennett says he was under the assumption the role of the OIO is to look after the New Zealand businesses from overseas investors. Labour's Waimakariri List Labour MP Clayton Cosgrove says that this is arrogance of the highest order on the Prime Minister's part and that there is no benefit in the sale for New Zealand. Clayton Cosgrove says the Overseas Investment Office did not do their job properly if they accepted the Americans' application without properly checking the Canterbury business involvement.
The bigger question is this: the applicant, the Americans, when they applied for OIO approval, never included the fact that this business was operating on their land, that it was going to be booted off their land, and that 16 people would lose their jobs. Yet the OIO, by its own act, Section 17, has to consider job retention and job creation.
Mr Cosgrove says Michael Woodhouse and John Key have both been made aware of the complaints and ignored them.
Well, I'm calling for the OIO to do their job and ministers to do their job and the Prime Minister to do his job. Pull the decision because it was made with inadequate information. The OIO was not aware that a business was operating, that jobs would be lost, that a business has had access for 23 years, that a business has actually maintained roads and added value.
New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters has also come out labelling the Minister of Tourism, Prime Minister John Key, as a phony for going missing on this occasion. With their impending eviction looming, High Country will now have to cancel more than 62 tours already booked between now and October 2015. Briar Babbington, CTV News.
Despite being the largest growing district in the country, Selwyn has been processing building consents in record time.
Proving consents can be processed on time, the Selwyn District Council has moved online to help speed up its procedures.
The process starts with the applicant going online, and it stays in the cloud, in the electronic environment right through the process, which obviously saves the applicant time. You don't have to travel to the council office anymore. You can do it over the internet.
The rapidly growing area is pushing through more consents for new dwellings than a year ago, granting 2,790 consents this year, up from just 2,390 in 2013. And it's all thanks to this online tool, introduced at the beginning of last year.
In the office, we can have multiple people working on the consent at the same time. We don't have to shift hard copies around the entire building, if you like. And at the end of the process, the inspection team record everything digitally and creates the ability for them to check records that otherwise they would have to come back to the office to check.
Following the events of the 2011 earthquakes, the Selwyn district has been flooded with Cantabrians moving out of the city and into the area. In 2011, the council issued just over 600 consents for new homes. But this year that has more than doubled, with the building consent team at the council issuing 1,600 consents in the past year.
Selwyn's still the fastest growing district in the country. So without the earthquakes, we were still out there needing to change and get better at what we were doing.
They've even been praised by IANZ for their efficiency, a contrast to the Christchurch City Council, who were stripped of their consenting accreditation last year because of major delays.
To the best of my knowledge, we're the only council that has got through the accreditation round twice consecutively without any corrective actions. So, big plus for the team.
The Selwyn district is processing their consents within 11 days, 9 days shorter than the required 20-day time frame. Emma Cropper, CTV News.
The Western Corridor is another step closer to completion following the turning of the sod on the next stage of the State Highway 1 upgrade.
Blessing the land before the Minister of Transport, Jerry Brownlee, donned his hard hat and high vis, breaking the first piece of land on the last section of the Western Corridor.
So this is part of our Roads of National Significance program. They are 7 roads across the country built in various sections. We've already seen the Southern Motorway opened, or a part of it opened here. And it's good to see that this Western Motorway is making such significant progress.
A project led by the New Zealand Transport Agency. The Western Corridor includes an upgrade of Johns Road between the Groins and Sawyers Arms Road. It will improve access to North and South Canterbury, with the state highway being widened to 4 lanes.
It's going to take quite a bit of heavy traffic off local roads because they can travel down here safely. It'll also improve for cyclists who want to use the road because we're putting a wider shoulder on there as well.
It's part of the $800 million investment to improve Christchurch's roads of significance, the most ambitious highway construction program ever undertaken in the South Island.
This sector was up to an hour's traffic jam after the earthquake. It's a very important feeder route between people from the north and the west and the south, so it's critical.
With progress well underway on the western and southern corridors, Minister Brownlee says working out the challenges of northern access to the city, which has seen up to 30 years growth in the past 4 years, would take place after the general election.
We need to get through next Saturday to work out exactly who will be doing most of the work on that, but it's a bit of work that does definitely need to be done.
But while work begins on the latest of the 3 sections of the Western Corridor, the Minister is hoping to take that digger home with him as a souvenir.
Now normally when you do a sod turning, you do it with a spade, and they give you the spade to take away as a souvenir, so if you could deliver this later in the day, I'd be very grateful. But
Minister Brownlee may be out of luck. That digger will be busy over the next 2.5 years, completing the Western Corridor, which is due to be finished in 2016. Emma Cropper, CTV News.
The Christchurch City Mission is starting to prepare 3 apartments for families needing urgent accommodation.
It needs more than a lick of paint, but the men's former night shelter at the Christchurch City Mission will soon be housing families. It will cost about $140,000 to renovate the building into 3 apartments for families urgently needing a place to stay. The government will fund the bulk of the cost, with the City Council picking up the rest of the tab.
These are families who are currently homeless and placing themselves at risk because of that.
Since the Christchurch City Mission moved across the road to new premises in 2012, these old buildings have been rented out as office space. The 3 self-contained units consist of 2-bedroom apartments. Another one on the top story has 3 bedrooms. The families would stay for up to 12 weeks at a time and have a range of social services to call on.
We get 2 or 3 families a week, perhaps sometimes more, who come and ask for help because they're homeless. They're in substandard homes, or they're in homes that are badly overcrowded, or they're sleeping in their cars, in sheds, garages.
However, because the families will stay for up to 3 months at a time, this means that potentially only 12 families may be able to stay here each year.
A lot more needs to be done. This is a really small project. It's just going to help 3 families at a time. But what we hope is that we'll be able to find good landlords with affordable, healthy homes who will be willing to rent to these people.
The accommodation still needs consent signed off before the renovations can begin. However, once the work starts, it should only take about 5 weeks to complete. Michael Gorman hopes the first families will be in here by Christmas.
And we'll work with them and try and find other safe, healthy accommodation for them.
The high demand for accommodation highlights the housing challenges Christchurch is experiencing.
We imagine that there's always going to be a need for accommodation in Christchurch for the foreseeable future.
However, the new apartments won't help homeless woman Tans, who is pregnant. CTV News first met Tans earlier in the year when she had a partner and a home. The Christchurch Press has now reported that Tans is 7 months pregnant and drifting between shelters while she works on the street. City Missioner Michael Gorman says unfortunately the City Mission's accommodation is only temporary, but their social agencies are working to find her a home. We'll have more on this later in the week. Marcus Gibbs, CTV News.
Coming up, migrant workers are struggling to find somewhere to live. Overseas workers are coming to Christchurch for work. However, some workers are struggling to find jobs or accommodation once they arrive.
Thousands of men and women have moved to Christchurch to help with the rebuild. But is the city the land of prosperity, as its leaders have been claiming? Major has been staying at the Christchurch City Mission for the last month. He moved to Christchurch with the hope of finding a job and accommodation, and although he has now taken on a role as a labourer, he still has no bed other than the one at the mission.
I've just been down here for the last 4 weeks, and the only best place that sort of helped me is the City Mission, and that's my story.
He's not the only one who has struggled to adjust to life in the Garden City. Christchurch City Missioner Michael Gorman says that since the earthquakes, maybe as many as 30 overseas migrants have taken shelter at the mission.
And sometimes people are not that well prepared and they come without doing their homework, I guess. But we certainly need a workforce in Christchurch, and I guess we have to welcome them and to cater for them.
The men's night shelter is free for anyone who needs it. The mission staff provided dinner, supper and breakfast. Washing machines, washing powder, showers and toilets are also available.
We have them perhaps up to a month. We have to ask them to move on after that time.
Tenants Protection Association manager Helen Gattoni says the number of migrants who have stayed at the mission since the earthquakes is shocking. She's concerned their presence is putting extra pressure on the mission.
Perhaps then creating a situation where the other homeless people who would traditionally reside at the mission are not able to access the living space at the mission.
The homeless community shares a mixed view on whether the city mission should be looking after migrants. One person told CTV News off camera they now thought of the mission as the backpackers for migrants. However, an advocate for the homeless says that anyone who needs help should receive it.
If people come here, we'll just feed anybody that comes, and we've had backpackers here at different times.
Associate Earthquake Recovery Minister Nikki Wagner says the migrants needing shelter at the mission have arrived on visitor visas and haven't planned ahead.
New Zealanders are generous people. We do not want to see people sleeping on our streets, but I certainly think people should think before they come, understand that there is a tight accommodation situation here and try and make plans before they arrive.
Labour's Christchurch Central candidate Tony Milne says the fact migrants are now seeking shelter is further proof Christchurch is experiencing a housing crisis.
There's just this massive shortage of supply of housing. We've got massive pressure on rentals. Rents have increased 41% in the last 4 years, and it's not just migrant workers.
Government figures estimate between 5,000 and 7,000 people are homeless. Some are staying with friends and couch surfing. However, others are living on the street or out of their cars. The fact that migrants are no exception shows that this housing crisis or challenge doesn't discriminate. Marcus Gibbs, CTV News.
Prime Minister John Key avoided spying accusations this week by turning the first sod for the University of Canterbury's Science and Engineering precinct.
A spade in the ground, the sign of new beginnings. Prime Minister John Key was at the University of Canterbury this afternoon, turning the first sod as a sign of the government's commitment to Canterbury.
They're very excited about what's happening here, and how magnificent the facilities are going to be, both in the science and innovation side and also the engineering school. So there's a very big bright light at the end of the tunnel, and it's going to do well. So you should be proud of what you're achieving. There's a lot of good things in front of you.
The government announced their $260 million commitment late last year to the University of Canterbury Science and Innovation Precinct.
The government has pledged up to $260 million to create the Science and Innovation Centre and to refurbish to modern standards and moderately expand the College of Engineering, already ranked in the top 20 centres of engineering in the world.
The innovation precinct will be called the Rutherford Science and Innovation Centre, after Ernest Rutherford, a former University of Canterbury student who trained as a physicist but won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1908.
It will be known as the Rutherford Science and Innovation Centre in continuation of a proud history as we drive towards the university's 150th anniversary.
Just days after the general election, the National Party ministers gathered for the event.
To make sure that post-September 20, while the rest of us are away working out who the government's going to be, that the university will be proceeding on with their plans and getting their construction underway and not delayed at all by the political process that's occurring.
The Tertiary Minister, Stephen Joyce, says it's more than just small beginnings. It's about helping be a part of what will set up the next generation of smart scientists, smart engineers and smart IT professionals. Minister Joyce believes the government's commitment will benefit not only the engineering students, but every Canterbury student.
Ultimately, what we are doing is providing a sum of money which supports the whole rebuild of the university. But the government wanted to really underline, I suppose, the importance of the science and engineering facilities, partly as part of the story of New Zealand over the next 10 or 20 years. And actually, it's in that space of science, engineering, ICT, that we really do have to move to take advantage of all our opportunities.
Joelle Batista, CTV News.
Still to come, 1,000 students took part in the Koru Games. The first Koru Games took place in Lincoln this week, with more than 1,000 students taking part.
It's not a sport the younger generation are often drawn to.
There's so many other sports, dominated in New Zealand, the likes of rugby, football, name a few. Although bowls is increasing in its profile, and the likes of Commonwealth Games have definitely increased the sort of profile of the sport.
But for these children, this year's first Koru Games is giving them the opportunity to take up this novel sport.
My grandma's actually been doing lawn bowls for a while, and so I decided maybe I'd make her proud and do a little bit of lawn bowls.
They're even learning a few tricks of the trade to give the older generation a run for their money.
One side's weighted, so you got to curve it and don't go too fast. Yeah.
And you have to get big curve and get it on the dot.
But these students already think they've got what it takes to make it to the top. Do you think you guys will be able to go to the Olympics with this sport?
Yeah. Totally. Win a mould, win a mould, maybe.
But for those who aren't quite confident, Bowls New Zealand offered free after-school lessons for the students.
Just to get them into it and just make sure that when they did arrive here, that they weren't that anxious about jumping on a green.
The Lawn Bowls competition is all part of the Koru Games, the first event of its kind in Canterbury. It's modelled on a similar tournament in the North Island, including more than 1,200 Year 7 and 8 students taking part in the 3-day sport competition.
We've got, we started off with an opening ceremony this morning. The games have just started, as you can see in the background, and they will continue on tomorrow through to Thursday, and we'll have a closing ceremony with all the prizes and what have you on Thursday.
More than 29 schools are going head-to-head to come out victors in 5 sports, including touch, basketball and netball.
Yeah, it's really cool. We saw one of the tactics came in before and she was talking to us about stuff, and it was really cool.
The Selwyn Sports Trust hoping to encourage sport amongst the younger generation.
South Island children an opportunity to compete in sport here in the South Island. So we've put it together primarily to give, as we said, South Island children an opportunity to compete in sport here in the South Island.
The students have 2 days left of the competition until the winners are announced on Wednesday. Emma Cropper, CTV News.
Hagley Cricket Oval officially opened this week ahead of next year's ICC Cricket World Cup.
It was the moment many were against.
Well done.
The opening of the Hagley Cricket Oval.
The pavilion is at that time the changing rooms and facilities for the Otago and Canterbury teams taking part in their representative game right here in 1869. History remains on this oval.
This is absolutely ideal. It couldn't have been better, and I think a lot of people will enjoy it.
Facing controversy over whether or not it should be built, yesterday marked an occasion Canterbury cricket had been dreaming of for more than a decade.
But we now have a venue here at Hagley Oval which is truly world class and which will host cricket matches at all levels, not just international and first class, but at all levels, and both male and females.
The $8.5 million complex can seat more than 20,000 spectators, and yesterday's opening marked a major milestone in the city's recovery. This is the first of the 17 anchor projects to be completed.
Canterbury Cricket has for some years been searching for an international compliant cricket venue, and the city has been deprived of test matches for far too long.
But it wasn't welcomed by all locals. The decision to build this state-of-the-art pavilion split Cantabrians, many not wanting South Hagley Park to become a commercial cricket ground, instead wanting it left untouched. The Save Hagley Park group took Canterbury Cricket to the Environment Court over resource consent, even going as far to get the Cricket World Cup's lawyers involved. But Trevor Thornton from the Canterbury Cricket Trust yesterday rejecting those claims.
I don't believe that anyone could disagree that this is a real asset to our city, that aesthetically it has enhanced what we know as South Hagley Park. And once more the youth of our city can see live our test players rather than simply on television.
The state-of-the-art complex will play host to the opening match of the ICC Cricket World Cup next year, when the Black Caps will go up against Sri Lanka.
No one will forget the fact that Canterbury unfortunately was locked out of the Rugby World Cup because of everything that took place with the earthquakes, and so symbolically that gesture I think is extremely important.
The opening match will take place on Valentine's Day, making use of Christchurch's new world-class facility. Emma Cropper, CTV News.
A unique celebration was held last weekend to mark the 40th anniversary of the Wizard of New Zealand.
Celebrating the old and welcoming in the new.
I hereby declare that Ari Freeman is now accredited by me as a proper, legitimate wizard.
This is the beginning of the wizard movement, which we hope will be global.
Around a dozen of the Wizard's apprentices officially moving up the ranks.
Now I am trusted to go off on my own to do wizardly and magical ads.
Jack was Christchurch's first wizard. He came onto the scene in the mid-1970s, becoming a regular at Cathedral Square, but following the quakes is often found with his apprentices at New Regent Street. Now he's preparing the next generation of wizards to take over.
Oh, we can get away from all this gravity. Jump, whoa, get your feet off the ground. Listen to the music of the world turning round.
Today has been a landmark in the history of wizardry in the modern world. Wizards have been either figures of legend or myth or escapist financial exploitation. This is real wizard stuff, approved of at the right levels, university, the government and the local peoples.
Hoping to spread their magic beyond the Canterbury Plains.
So we begin to expand into larger and larger numbers. I'm hoping that we'll have hundreds eventually. We don't know, but there's a possibility.
But it was a celebration of his own as well. Jack was celebrating his 40th year as a wizard, moving up the ranks himself yesterday, being elevated to Archwizard. He invited locals to join the celebrations with rides on the Christchurch gondola. Emma Cropper, CTV News.
That's CTV News Week in Review. I'm Grant Mangan. Have a great weekend.